Welcome everyone to the Level Up Your Legacy podcast. My name is Paul McCosco. I'm joined here with Bill Cox. What's up, Bill?
Morning, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. You look very bright and light this morning. What's going on there?
It's just all the medication I'm on, honestly. You know what? I've had
it's not the lighting.
It's
just you've gone nuclear internally.
It's the inner glow of all of the all of
the inner glow of Paul McCosco.
The inner purification of the antibiotics. That's the transformation taking place inside. No, all honesty, I've had a cough for like a month, and the doctors are trying to figure out what's going on. So Bill and I were joking earlier. It's been a ride. I feel like my diet is Bill's lately. I'm not used to this, nor do I like it, nor can I wait for it to be over, but that could be contributing to the glow.
Oh, dude, that doesn't sound nearly as good as the steak I had this weekend, so I'm sorry.
Ugh, see, there you go. You've got the glow. You've got the meat glow.
I've always got the meat glows.
That's it. But hey, we're not here to talk about our glow.
Meat glows, meat sweats. No, I'm just kidding.
That's it. Oh my goodness. So back on track. We've been in the book Ego is the Enemy for the last 10 podcasts. We've really dived into this book and have gotten a lot out of it. And I hope you have as well. And you know what it makes me think of, Bill? It makes me think of that song by Semisonic, Closing Time. It's every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. And I just love that. I love the season of fall because it's kind of like the end of the year, you know, and you get to see how you've grown and take it to the next level next year. And I think that that's what we're going to do today. We're going to learn some of those final lessons, put a cap on it, and see what we can do to grow as we move forward. Hopefully a little less egotistical. Does that sound good?
Well, I think that's a great idea.
I love it. All right. So today, as we conclude our discussions on this book, we're going to button it up in a way that I think ties the whole concept of ego together. It's the invisible thread that binds the entire book. And that thread is love. Love enables us to fully embrace what's ahead of us without trying to inflate ourselves or assert ourselves in manners for selfish gain, but rather elevate and serve those around us while thinking of ourselves in a proper light. And man, I'll tell you what, that's hard to do sometimes. It's hard to think of ourselves in a proper light. And it's hard to want what's best for those who are around us and not try to scrap and fight for what we believe we deserve, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
We were talking a little bit before this about Martin Luther King and how he embodied so many of these concepts of selflessness and servant leadership. And one of my favorite quotes of his, love is freedom, for hate is too heavy a burden to carry. And, you know, when we think about what ego ties us to, it's a prison. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Let's talk about how love is freedom, how hate is a prison, and how we can't get sucked in.
Yeah, I mean, if you read this chapter, it's one of the final chapters in the book, you just come away with this idea that we have a choice in life, that there's a series of examples in the book about people who could have easily, and did in some cases, felt slighted. And so, you know, here are a series of examples of people who felt disrespected or slighted or mistreated, from, like you mentioned, Martin Luther King Jr., Nixon. In the book, they talk about Fredrick Douglass, Orson Welles. A lot of these characters from the chapter, Randolph Hearst, you know, that media magnate at the time. And you see, we hit this fork in a road where we have a choice. You know, what am I going to do in those situations when I feel disrespected, hurt, injured? You know, like my dignity has been violated. Does anybody not, has anybody not experienced that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, like,
loaded question.
hello, that is to be human. That happens to all of us. It's happened to all of us multiple times. And you see in the chapter where they hit this fork in the road when this happens, I have a choice. I have a choice either to use that as an opportunity to continue to keep my heart open and live free, or to cause that, that allow that situation to cause me to become hardened or bitter, or even to give up in life. So it's funny, I was listening to Darren Hardy. I get his daily email called Darren Daily, and he told this story, which I think really ties into the chapter well. This daughter comes home from school one day. She's in high school, and it's just been a rough patch for her, from friends at school to extracurricular stuff not going right, to her grades, having problems with teachers and grades. And she was just kind of ranting and raving to her dad, and her dad really didn't say anything. He went over to the stove. He got 3 pots, put water in each pot, and then in the first pot, he took out some potatoes and put it in that pot. In the second pot, he took some eggs and put it in that pot. The third pot, he put some coffee beans. And he just allowed those to just come to a simmer over time. And she's like watching him do this. And he looked at the stove and he said, "What do you see?" And she said, "Well, Dad, I see 3 pots. One has potatoes, one has eggs, and one has coffee. What's your point?"
Must have been a teenager.
Do I got that?
Games, Dad. Come on.
Attitude. So he said, "We'll go over to the first pot with the potatoes." He said, "Feel the potato. What do you notice about it?" She said, "Well, it's soft now." He said, "Well, now go to the second pot with the egg." He said, "What do you notice about the egg?" And she cracked the egg, peeled it open. She said, "Well, it's hard boiled now." And he said, "What about that third pot?" He went over and he grabbed a ladle and he scooped out some of the coffee and put it in a cup and handed it to her. And you could just kind of smell the aroma and the richness. And she took a sip and she kind of smiled. She's like, "Wow, that tastes really good." He said, "Honey, life is like that. There are going to be situations in life where we face adversity, where things happen to us, where we feel mistreated, disrespected. And we're always going to have a choice, and we will choose. We'll choose one of these paths. We'll allow this adversity in life to cause me maybe to soft or become weak and just kind of give up, assume the fetal position. Anybody ever been there? Or you could do like the hard-boiled egg. It was, if you remember before we put it in the water, it was once soft, but now look, it's become rigid and hard. He said, you can allow such pain in life to cause you to become resentful or bitter. Or you could be like the coffee. And when the heat was applied to it, it became something altogether different. It changed, it transformed to something beautiful and beneficial, and actually something that tastes good and something that someone could enjoy. He said, anytime we face situations in life like that, we have a choice. And which choice are you going to make? It kind of made me think about this chapter. One of my favorite examples from the chapter, Booker T. Washington tells an anecdote told to him by Fredrick Douglass about a time he was traveling and was asked to move and ride in the baggage car because of his race. A white supporter rushes to apologize for the horrible offense. He said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Douglass, you've been degraded in this manner." Person said Douglass would have none of it. He wasn't angry. He wasn't hurt. He replied with great fervor, "They cannot degrade Fredrick Douglass. The soul that is within me can no man degrade. I'm not the one that is being degraded on account of this treatment, but those who are inflicting it upon me." And I thought, wow. I mean, if I could be more like that, that's the coffee, that's the third pot with the coffee beans. And I think when you look at Fredrick Douglass, it's not hard to understand why he was used as such a transformative and influential person in the whole process of racial equality.
So do you think that strength of character came from a mindset that he had, or where does that come from, that he could not get angry, not get bitter, and see the high road even through the valley that he was being dragged through in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Fredrick Douglass very well. I don't know his story super well. I do know a lot about myself and a lot about the people that we work with in coaching. I know that, and we've talked about this already multiple times in this series on this book, that mindset, our map of the world, the way we think about what happened, what we choose to believe, and the story we tell ourselves about the things that happen to us in life tell the story of our lives. It forms the trajectory of our life. The story about Nixon, and how he saw himself in the chapter as always this guy who was the fighter, like the
Sure.
world was against him. And he surrounded himself with people who kind of had that same mindset. And that ultimately, in some way, became his downfall because he looked at every situation that way. That was the filter for everything, even when it didn't need to be. And it ultimately was part of what led to his downfall. And could he have chosen to see the world differently? Yeah, he could have. Where does that come from? I mean, for a lot of us, one of the biggest influences we talk about in coaching in terms of how our mindset is formed is from our family of origin. I mean, from the point of conception to around, I don't know, it fluctuates a little bit, let's say 9 years old. The primary brain wavelength that our brain functions on is a brain wavelength, or at least a lot of the time, is called theta. It's that slower, bigger, imaginative brain wavelength why a lot of times you see kids playing and imagining themselves,
like a dreaming kind of state.
Yeah, playing house. I used to play with matchboxes and build all these cities and towns, and I just imagined myself actually functioning, living, and being in those things. But also at that stage of life, they're absorbing life. It's almost like an analogy would be when you download a software onto your computer, or when you buy a new computer. If you buy a Windows machine, what's the operating system? The operating system is Windows. And because that's been kind of pre-programmed into the computer, so the computer sees and operates and does everything out of that framework of Windows, that operating system. Much the same way with us as human beings. We've downloaded that software. It's become, and by and large, our operating system, because at that stage in life, we were just absorbing everything. And what were we absorbing the most from? We were absorbing the most from the people who we spent the most time with. Our parents, our siblings, that extended family, that environment that we grew up in was what we knew. And so in many ways, it becomes an operating system without us even being consciously aware of it. And that's the cool thing about when we grow into adulthood. Part of what separates us from animals is the power of consciousness, the capacity to kind of almost get above my life. This is what mature adults do, and look down on my life from an objective standpoint and evaluate, okay, wow, I've always told myself that people in business only get into business because they just want to get rich. Well, is that true all the time in every situation? Are there situations where people in business do that and take advantage of people? Yeah. But I also know a lot of people in business who got into business truly because they wanted to use their talent or gift to serve others and add value to them and help the world and make it a better place. Okay. So there are a lot of mindsets we hold. They're true for us. They feel very true, and we interpret everything through that lens. It doesn't make them objectively true all the time in every situation. So that's, go ahead.
So I got a question then, like the computer analogy, you turn on your computer and it does its job. It boots up and it's running its program, but you don't really notice it because it's just functioning, right?
Yeah,
so when you
absolutely.
think about that, how do you examine the program that's running? Like, and you flip it back to us, how do we see those mindsets we've held on to? Because a lot of times we're just running on autopilot. We're thinking the thoughts that we've always thought. We're being, aware of what we've always been aware of. We're not challenging ourselves to think deeper. Like if you had to coach someone into really examining the mindsets that they hold, how would you coach them? Where do you start to figure out what your mindset
Well,
are?
I mean, there's a lot of ways of going about this. One is simply just kind of having them go back through their life as a kid,
Hmm.
kind of the highs and lows experiences of their life. What were some of the most memorable experiences of their childhood growing up? And what were some of the values or beliefs that they formed based on those experiences, right?
Hmm.
Um, Anytime we have emotional experiences, whether they're like great, happy, high emotional experiences or low, very difficult, sad, challenging emotional experiences where we feel anger, fear, pain, rejection, those sorts of things. Behind that stands something more sacred and valuable, and that's our values. And so where, emotions are, or excuse me, emotions are to values like smoke is to a fire. So kind of going through a highs and lows experiences of your growing up and identifying what were some of those things that you learned, to beliefs that were kind of handed down to you from your family of origin. And then evaluating, looking at those, how have those beliefs impacted the life you're experiencing right now? What have been the effects of those beliefs in real time? What has believing that about life or about people or about money or about authority resulted in? Is it a good result? Has it been a positive result? Has it been a healthy result? Another one would be simply to ask a client to keep a journal. And as you go throughout the day and things happen to you, anything in life, you have an interaction with a friend that made you laugh, or you have somebody who said something to you that was hurtful, or you experience some sort of adversity. In journal what you said to yourself. The reality is we talk to ourselves all the time. There's that little voice inside our head, that little color commentator who, has something to say about every experience we encounter throughout the day. And so a good conscious awareness raising exercise is every time you have one of those moments where you tell yourself something about what just happened, you write it down. Don't judge it. Just write it down and move on with your day. And then at the end of a week, what continually shows up in that narrative? What are some of the constant things that you're telling yourself? It could be anything from, this always happens to me. I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes to handle this situation. This is never going to end. Why does this always happen to me? Things like that, so-and-so always does that. Anytime you start to see certain words, the hyper exaggerative descriptive words, always, never, every, those are kind of like red flags. Okay. You're probably getting a little overheated and irrational in your perspective on what's happening in your life. And every time that way, when you start writing those things down, you start seeing those narratives, you can start to get a much more, you become much more aware of what actually is going on inside. And when we do that, a lot of times like, wow, I was not aware the extent to which I'm saying these things to myself. And no wonder I'm frustrated or angry all the time or fearful, or filled with anxieties, because I'm like constantly telling myself. And we know, like, one of the things that we learned through studying the brain, NLP theory talks about this concept of the structure of experience. It's like this cycle. It's like this loop. It starts with some form of stimulus, okay, that enters through the brainstem, something that we see, taste, touch, smell, experience. And then the next thing in that cycle is our interpretation of that. That's the story we tell, okay? And that's where our values and beliefs kick into gear without us even consciously being aware of it. We then interpret what that experience meant. Based on our interpretation, then it generates an emotional response or a feeling. And that feeling, finally, the fourth thing, always drives an action or a reaction. But it all starts with those beliefs, those mindsets that oftentimes are just simmering and hovering below the level of consciousness, but influencing every aspect of our lives. And we can change those things. I think that's the cool thing. we can change those. We can upgrade those.
But we have to know them first, right?
But we have to know them first.
Level of awareness.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly right.
So when you think about the things that just happen, right? The things that we do on autopilot, Ryan Holiday even said it's easier to hate and it's natural to lash out when those people come against us, or when, that thing happens that we didn't like, or when we're put into a situation that we weren't ready for. Like, our natural inclination is to be vengeful and to want justice when injustices are done to us. But what we find is that great leaders, instead of hating, they start to feel empathy for their enemies in situations like that. So that's a game changer. That's a perspective shift. That's one of those things I look at MLK and I'm like, civil disobedience. I don't know how you did it. Like, in the face of just blatant injustice, cultivating a sense of love, cultivating a sense of empathy. How do you do that?
Well, I want to flip that around, because I think this is something you actually do well. And we didn't really even plan for this. You're much better at this than I am. It's hard for me to cultivate empathy. I don't know. We were talking about this yesterday. My personality is, like when I feel something deeply, a conviction about something, like I'm just all in on that. And I know this is something I have to work on a lot. I can get caught up, almost like Nixon, it's me against the world, and I'm fighting the world, and there's so much going on. And it's like, I get like, dude, take a pill for a second. I think this is something you do really well. I learn a lot from you on this. How do you maintain, just in this empathetic spirit? Because you've experienced just as much adversity and challenge as I have.
Well, thank you for the compliment. First of all, I don't think I always get it right. And as much as you can say you look to me for that sense of empathy, I look to you for just being so good at taking a stand for what you believe and being so certain about it. Because I think it's a strength and maybe a little bit of a downfall of mine to just be able to honor and see what other people think and what they feel like. And mirror neurons are a real thing. Like if my son is cut, then I feel it just like he feels it, and when someone is angry, I take on a lot of that emotion. I feel a lot of that anger that other people feel. So naturally, when someone comes against me, like, I feel why they're angry at me. I feel why they're upset at me. And it's easier for me to have empathy because I hurt like they're hurting, and I don't know necessarily that is a trait that I've worked on, or if that's just something that I do. But I do, which is really difficult sometimes because it's hard for me to articulate clearly what I believe, because I'm always got such a sense of but that might not be possible, or someone else might feel a little bit different about that. And, I'm always like, the Bible talks about in James about being a double-minded man. And I feel like I struggle with double-mindedness a lot because I'm always weighing other perspectives. I'm always trying to see things from another side. I'm always trying to entertain, the strong feelings of others and why they feel them. And, it creates a lot of inner turmoil, but also for good. I think it also gives me a good sense of empathy because it helps me really enter into their struggle, enter into their difficulty. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's really good. So you're able to kind of put yourself much more naturally or easily into the shoes or experience of the person who's angry
Yeah.
and almost kind of feel for them as they're
Well,
looking at you.
yes. And I
And
think about the story that I have of my life and has led me to think and believe and act the way that I do. And everybody has a story.
Mhm,
It is fascinating when you ask somebody how their day is going
mhm,
and you continue to pry and you realize there is junk going on in everybody's life. And as you start to peel back those layers and you start to learn the story or just see like a tenth of what they're going through, naturally empathy cultivates
mhm,
because you understand that, we're all a mess. Every one of
mhm,
us is a mess. And it's just, the amount of mess that you're willing to show other people
mhm.
that, that you're comfortable being vulnerable, bearing, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. As you think about some of these characters, it's just occurred to me from this chapter. You think about Fredrick Douglass, you think about Martin Luther King Jr. It's not like these were just uh, wallflowers.
Hmm. Sure.
They had convictions that they held deeply,
Yeah.
and they seemingly fearlessly pursued, stood in those, faced incredible opposition for being true to those convictions, values, and beliefs. And at the same time, they did that in a way that didn't cause them to become consumed by the very things that they were fighting for,
Hmm.
all the injustice and those sorts of things, and the disrespect and just a fundamental violation of their human dignity. I mean, those things, I look at their life and I think, man, they deserve
Sure.
to be angry and bitter. And yet they still did not allow that anger to evolve into hatred. Their anger fueled them to do righteous things and good things and necessary things in the world. And yet, personally, they still chose to remain free and open and forgiving in their spirits. And I don't know quite how they did that. For me, a big part of that is seeing myself a little more realistically, being
Hmm.
honest with myself. It's easy for me to notice and get all offended when other people disrespect me or treat me in a way that they shouldn't, frankly. Okay. It's not
Sure.
like these things aren't real offenses, they are. They violate or the God DNA in us and the way God would have people treat one another. So they're real. But at the same time, I'm a broken person too.
Hmm.
I'm a sinner too. I do and say things that I shouldn't. I don't bring my best self to meetings and conversations all the time. And as such, I do things that hurt other people too. And what do I want in those situations where I'm not bringing my best self? Well, I want understanding. I want grace. I want forgiveness. And I think the more I can see myself realistically, the more I can stay more gracious and merciful and open-hearted to others on a consistent basis. It reminds me of the verse in Peter. Peter says, love covers a multitude of sins.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean it glosses over real injustice or wrong, but Peter is basically saying, listen, the world's broken, doesn't work right often. And there are times in life where we just have to choose to love, to look over, to look past an offense, to let it go.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of benefit to us in doing that. One of my favorite books on forgiveness by Lou Smedes is called The Art of Forgiving. And it was one of the best books I've ever read on this topic. And one of the points that Smedes makes is, listen, the biggest winner in choosing to forgive people for the things they've done that have hurt you is you. So if for nothing else, forgive selfishly.
That's
Forgive
hilarious.
for yourself, because you're going to be the biggest winner. Your spirit is going to be set free. It's interesting, when we choose not to forgive, when we choose to become resentful or bitter, what happens? Well, we put ourselves in our own self-imposed prison of bitterness and resentment. And in fact, the very person who hurt us is the very person that we allow to maintain control over our lives. And the truth is, they don't even care. They don't even know or are aware of that we're having this big time existential struggle. They're going on with their lives just fine. But here I am, bitter,
Stewing
angry,
and
unhappy.
simmering. Yeah.
And one thing I know about, people, when we covered this, there's many different definitions of success. Okay. And it matters what your definition is. But a lot of people, to them, they'll always say, happiness is a central part. I want to be happy in life. Okay. I think most of us as humans do. We want to experience a level of just peace and happiness in life. It just feels better. And so if you're struggling with someone who's hurt you, a colleague, a boss, you've been disrespected, you haven't treated like you deserve, you haven't paid what you deserve, all these things that happen, just forgive, let it go. And you'll find that it will free your spirit, your emotions, your mental, psychological state. You'll just be happier. It's like that, going back to that Euripides quote, and why should we feel anger at the world? As if the world would notice. You're the only one who's really paying the price for this. And you have the power. You can choose to make it different. And I think that's one of the things that I love about coaching, is just helping people realize just how much personal power they have through the choices they make to really make their lives qualitatively, substantively better.
Well, and I think that's a great place to stop. We can choose to love no matter what's been done to us or what the nature of our circumstance is. Love is the higher ground. And I was thinking about this. If ego is the enemy, then love is our greatest friend, right? Like, what is love? Love is selflessness. Love is giving yourself up for somebody else. That needs to be our legacy. So,
yeah, I went through the epilogue last night. The thing I love about Ryan Holiday is he's so honest with his own life. Yeah. And he's like, this isn't a once and done thing. This is something that we all it's an existential struggle for us. We will always have the ego. The Bible refers to it as the flesh. It's not going anywhere. We're going to wake up to it every day, and we're going to battle those dark drives, and the pride is the root of all that. It always will be. But let's battle well,
Yeah. Did you catch his analogy that he used when he was talking about that, as sweeping the floor? He's like, you sweep the floor and that doesn't mean that it's clean forever. No, in like 20 minutes, there's dust and grime and dirt, and you got to sweep the floor again.
Keep sweeping.
That's it.
It's worth it. And I think over time, as we keep sweeping, it's easier to keep the house clean, right?
Yeah.
Because then it becomes these healthy habits, this emotional, spiritual hygiene that I exercise on a regular basis, and then just kind of settle into a healthy life rhythm that just feels better, but we always have to stay on top of.
We're going to dive into another book starting in just next week or the week after. We're going to go into Boundaries for Leaders. If you have a copy, join along with us. We'd love to just read this along with you. And if not, we would love to share with you the insights that we're going to glean. So make sure you sign up for our email list at billcoxcoaching.com. Click on free gift and newsletter. We'll get you connected, and we'll keep you up to date with all future podcasts that come your way. And if you found this message to be inspiring or helpful, and maybe you want to pass it on to someone, feel free to forward this as an attachment to them. We want to encourage other people that we've never even been connected with. So you can help us to do that. So until next time, this is Paul McCosco and Bill Cox saying so long for now on the Level Up Your Legacy live stream and podcast.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks again for watching today's video. And before you go, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you go to billcoxcoaching.com. Sign up for our regular newsletter to help you move from success to significance and lead your life in such a way that you live a legacy. Have a great day.